are live. For everyone who's just popping in, post your name and your social media on the chat, and tell us where you're joining us from today.
Well, there certainly was a lot of interest. Let's see how many people are able to make it, huh?
We will give it 2 more minutes and then we will kick off. Everyone just joining into the chat right now, tell us your name, share your social media links, and tell us where you're joining from today. Right, we will get started. Can everyone see the slides here?
Yes.
So, cool. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our inaugural relaunch of GEG UK and a really special session here where we'll be looking at Data Studio with Chris Smith. So thank you, especially to the to my fellow folks from the UK for joining us. Really late, but it promises to be a great session. On the Hangouts this evening, you've got myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Abid Patel. I'm the newly appointed leader for GEG UK. I'm also a Google Certified Innovator and Trainer from the London 19 cohort. And we've also got Stephanie Howell. I'd like to thank Stephanie for doing all the logistics on getting this Hangouts together. And we've also got Stephanie Rothstein and Karen Compton. And thank you to both of you guys for getting this all set up with Chris. And just to say, this is our very first GEG UK Hangouts of 2020, and please do follow GEG UK on Twitter. It's at GEG_UK. We will have some really exciting new Hangouts coming up every now and then, and we'll be looking at some of the most wanted sort of features to talk about. So definitely keep an eye out on the Twitter and follow all of us on Twitter, and we'll definitely be posting on there as to what's coming up soon. And without further ado, I will hand over to Chris, and you can see the bit.ly link there. If someone could just post that on the chat, feel free to leave your questions for Chris. We've got a document there, and we've got some questions on, and I'm sure that Chris will be happy to address those at the end of the presentation. But for now, Chris, it's all yours.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to this. Thanks for the questions. I was following that. I didn't see much up, and then I popped on this morning, and it's full. So I'll do my best to try to answer some of these things as we go through the session. But the things that perhaps I'm not able to get to, I'll follow up later on, and I'll probably just type some stuff in there. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Let's see. Give me just a moment. When I prepare this, just to give you a heads up, if you are already familiar with Google Data Studio and you have used it, this might seem a bit simple and a bit mundane. So this is just mainly for people that are unfamiliar with Google Data Studio and haven't used it before. So what I'm going to try to do is just to give you an overview, and we'll just do a bit of a follow along, so you can try it out as we go. While I'm doing this, if there are some questions that come up, or if I'm going too fast, just give me a shout out and let me know that. So the goals for this, the first thing is to understand how Google Data Studio can be used in education. Understand how to organize a spreadsheet of data and get it connected to GDS. And then at the end, we'll have a template of the student profile that seemed to be popular, and also a template of the spreadsheet that you could use for collecting data. And I'll teach you how to get those things connected together. So the format, we're going to start off with the first part. I'm going to just give you, we're going to have a blank slate, and we're going to look at Google Data Studio kind of right from the beginning, what it looks like. And we're actually going to use some innovator data. I think most of the people in here, maybe not all, are Google innovators from 2019. So you might recognize some of the data that comes up. And then once we're done with that, then we'll hop into the student profile, the template that I created. The first part should be okay. The second part might get a little technical and a little challenging for some. If you feel that it's a bit too much, you can always kind of follow along and then go back and watch the video and try it again yourself afterwards. All the links are provided for you. Anything, just you can try to put it in the chats. I might not be able to see it, but just turn on your speaker and give me a shout out if you need me to to slow down or if you have a question, please. Right there, if you can go ahead and get that link. Now that'll take you to this presentation. Let me go ahead and drop it in the chats. And you should, and then you can go ahead and access that, and that's where all the links are. So when you get access to that, you'll go try to get to this slide where it says links to get started. I've divided the slides up into 2 sections. So we'll start with this first one. So Google Data Studio is, some people ask, how is it different from Google Sheets, or why would you use this over Google Sheets? We use both. Google Data Studio is just another data visualization software. There are a lot of them out there. People that are more advanced with data visualization and analytics, they'll use stuff like BI or Tableau for some of their data analysis. Google Data Studio is nice because it's free. It links already with the Google suite of spreadsheets and whatnot, so it just makes it a little bit easier. I also like Google Data Studio for making dashboards because it's kind of like a bit of a blank canvas. So if you can open up the spreadsheet, make sure you have that open. Go ahead and get that popped open. And this, I just want to walk through what the spreadsheet is and how it's organized, just so you have an idea of what's going on. So I took the information on this tab down here, this link to cohort website. And this is the website that's available online, public, that links to all the cohorts and all the people that are in the cohorts for 2019 and before that. I just took that information, and what I did was, like if you're in the New York cohort, I just copied basically your name, whether you were male or female, and then what country you were from. The image, this is your cohort image that you created. Andy Caffrey gave this to me, and I just uploaded it. So we have an image here. And this is just manually typed in all of this stuff. If I go to this combo tab, the very first tab, if you look at the top in the formula row, this is where some of the magic happens in spreadsheets. Using something called an array formula, we're able to combine all of the sheets together into one sheet. And then we'll use this one sheet as our data source, what we call our source for data and connecting data. So if you have that open, then that's great. I'm going to go ahead and open Google Data Studio. If this is your first time to use Google Data Studio, when you hop on, you should see this screen that has a couple of templates at the top. There's a big plus sign to create a new report, a blank report. Go ahead and click on the blank report if you're following along. And then it should start to walk you through some authorizations and put your name in and that kind of thing. So take a moment to do that. I'll give you a couple of minutes to kind of click and walk through that. And then when you're ready, you should be in the blank report. And it should just kind of look like a blank canvas, similar to what's on my screen. Like I said, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat if I'm going too fast, or if you're not able to understand what I'm doing, just type it in there and I'll try to slow down or address it. All right, so for sake of time, I'm gonna go ahead and move on. So Google Data Studio, this is the way that it works is to create a report, you can't do anything in here until you have some data. And so the data that we have is going to be coming from that spreadsheet that I shared with you. Over on the right side, you can see I have a bunch of different spreadsheets because I've collected lots of data sources. I'm just going to if you go all the way to the bottom, there should be a section where it says create new data source, a plus sign. So if you tap on that, it should go ahead and open up another window for you. And Google Data Studio can connect to tons of different data sources across the web, whether you're using BigQuery or Google Analytics or lots of different things. For today, we are just going to use the Google Sheets. So it should be on there on the top. You hover over it and then click on the blue select. When you do that, this will open up a window that shows all of the spreadsheets in your Google Drive. Since you have already clicked on that GDS Innovator 2019 example, that should be at the top. If not, you can scroll a little bit and find it. So if you tap on that, this is how you can start to connect your data to Google Data Studio. Once you click on the spreadsheet that you want, there's another column that opens that says Worksheet. And what this does is it just lists out all of the tabs that are in the spreadsheet you have selected. So from here, you can decide which spreadsheet you want to use. You can have individual spreadsheets that you connect all together into Google Data Studio, but it's a bit cumbersome. For this activity, that's why I combine them into the combo sheet. So we're going to select it. Just make sure that the combo sheet is kind of highlighted. It should be automatically because it's at the top. Do not click on this little arrow that goes out. It'll take you back to the spreadsheet. So just make sure it's kind of blue or gray. And then up in the upper right-hand corner, there's a connect button. We're going to click on that. Once we click on the import button, then what this does is it automatically detects what type of data is in the spreadsheet. And Google Data Studio is pretty good at noticing what we have. So there are two kinds of things. There are things called metrics, and then there are dimensions. And a dimension is just kind of your data, usually your text data, and then a metric is usually numbered data. And you can see in the type of data, it automatically pulls that in. You can also see for image, it does a URL because there is a URL in there. So that's kind of cool. It sets it up. I do notice one thing that we need to change here. So it's always good to double check this just to make sure. The second row, it says country. Now for country, that's a geographical location, and we want to be able to use that as a geographical location in Google Data Studio. So if I hover over text and I click on the drop-down menu, I can come down here and select geo. And then I just want to make sure, and there's lots and lots of different options. We're just going to stick with country for now. So hover over that and change it to country. It says, do you want to change it? We say yes. And so now we should get a little globe in there and the word country. And then once you have it set up that way, right up at the top where it said, where you got that connect button, it says add to report. We're going to click on add to report. And then when it processes, then we're kind of back to that blank canvas, but now we've got a few more things going on. We have our menu at the top. It automatically dumped a table in there for us. That's fine. And then on the right-hand side, this is kind of our control panel. This is where we can add in the different elements to our charts in order to get what we want. So what we're going to do, what I like to do in Google Data Studio, think of this as just a blank piece of paper. I'm going to take this chart that they dropped in for us, and I'm just going to click and drag, and I'm just going to move it down a bit. Then I usually like to put a border at the top of my page for titles or for different things. So up here in the menu bar, all the way to the edge, there's a circle and a square. That's where we can add shapes. There's not a whole lot you can add, but for what we need to do, it's enough. We're going to click on rectangle, and I'm just going to go over to the far upper left corner, and I'm going to click and drag, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle. It doesn't matter really what size. I'm just going to put something up at the top there so I can use to have a little space for later on. This is just some layout things that I do. If you notice, my box goes off the edge. It's fine. When you share this, it doesn't matter. Anything that's off the edge won't show. But if you don't like that, you can always bring it in. We have the snap grids that will help you align things. So we have that. let's go back to our table. And I'm just going to go ahead and just move that around just a little bit. When I click on the table here, I have this menu on the right side. And this is where we add our information in. So if we look at this now, at the top, this is important. It says this is our data source. So this is the spreadsheet we already linked it to. So that's great. You have to have that in there. And then you have to have some dimensions. And so right now it has academy, and so we can see that here, so we know what the academies are. And then it just has record count. So it's telling us, this is basically telling us how many people were at each academy. All right. Let's make this a little bit more interesting. I'm going to go over here to my available fields, and these are exactly what was in the spreadsheet. We have those different columns, and so we can access that information. So let's take the image, and I'm just going to click and drag, and I'm going to drop it right below the dimension where that add dimension is, the plus sign. If I just drop that in there, it will go ahead and put that into my table. Now the URL is great, but for this, it's not exactly what we want. We actually want to see that image. So we can adjust this a little bit. So I'm still on the right menu there above image. Right where that link is, if I tap on it, or if I hover over it, it changes to a pencil. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then down at the bottom where it says show as URL, I'm going to tap on that and actually change that to image. When you do that, it should populate in the logos. Hopefully we're good with that. All right. Like I said, speak up if you need to. Now let's go ahead and add in some names. So I'm just going to tap on first name here, and we'll do it the same way. I'm just going to drop it below the image. Let's add in a last name, drop it below the image. And now we're starting to get our table kind of put together. What we can do is, if you go hover over the table here, we can actually drag this down and resize it. So I'm just going to pull it down a bit so it kind of fills up the space down there. And so now we have our academy, we have our image, first and last name, and then this record count. For this table right now, we actually don't need the record count because this is just basically saying there's one person with each of these names. And for this, it's really not that important for us. So down here in the metric on the right side, the blue one, I'm actually going to just click on the X and get rid of that. So it'll just get rid of that column. So now we have this table here. All right. So that's fine, but let's go ahead and add in something else. So we have the countries. So we're going to go ahead and create a new chart. So the way to create a new chart is up at the top here where it says add chart. If you click on that drop down menu, this gives you a list of all the different charts that Google's Data Studio has. Those of you that are into data visualization, you'll notice this is a pretty limited, but for most things that you want to do, you should be able to find a chart that suits your needs. Right in the middle, there's this geo map chart. So let's go ahead and use this. So we're going to click on that, and you just kind of hover over where you want it to start, and then go ahead and click to put it in. And I'm going to go ahead and make this map a little bit bigger. I'm going to stretch it so it kind of fills the page there. Now what this has done was it automatically, as a geo map, it's because we changed our dimension at the beginning to say country, this automatically recognizes that we have countries. And so this is creating a heat map. So the countries that are darker, that means that there are more people from those countries. The countries that are lighter have less people. So you get a really quick visual of where innovators from around the world came from. So that's kind of cool. And we're not going to do much else with that. Now, let's say we wanted to look at maybe male to female ratio because we have that data. So we're going to go ahead and add a new chart. And for this one, I'm not a big fan of pie charts, but we'll go ahead and use a pie chart because we're only comparing 2 data points. So if I tap on pie chart, I'm just going to drag it and place it right below the map there. And when I put that in, it will go ahead and it automatically brings in Academy data as default because that's the top one. And that's fine. We're actually not going to use the Academy data. We're going to change that. And there's a question about, can you change colors? Yes, I'll get to that in just a minute. So over on our available fields type, prefix is the one in the spreadsheet that is the column for male, female. So I'm going to take prefix and I'm going to drag it on top of the dimension for academy, and it should update my pie chart. So you should have male, female there. Now, that's kind of small. The numbers are hard to see. So any of these charts, and I didn't talk about this too much, you can, when you're selected a chart, you can actually go into the style menu. And in here, you can go through and you can change your font sizes, you can change your colors, you can change, there are lots of different features that you can change. It's pretty intense. I'm just gonna go down to this label section, and I'm going to change my font size to something a little bit bigger, maybe around 20 pixels. So that makes it a little bit bigger, a little bit easier to see. Now, those of you data visualization and you're looking at colors and all that stuff, this is not necessarily how I would do it, but I would do it a little bit differently, but this is okay for demonstration purposes. Let's add one more chart. Say we wanted to add in, like, what was the diversity at each of the academies? How many different people from different countries were coming? We can do that super easy. So let's add a new chart for that. And we're going to use for this one, if you go down to bar charts, we have different types of bar charts. We have horizontal, vertical bar charts, and some are stacked. And we have these horizontal bar charts. I'm gonna come all the way over to the right side, and I'm gonna choose this one that says 100% stacked bar chart. And this one, basically what it does is it takes all your numbers and it turns them into percentages. So it gives you kind of tells you how much of each thing there is related to the total. Now this one automatically pulled into male, female. And we don't want that for this chart. We actually want the, we want to know the countries. So right up here for our dimension, it has academy, which is fine. And that's what we want, the different academies. But then it has this this drill down. So we can take the academies and we can break them apart a bit. Right now it's breaking apart into male, female. We're going to change that to country. So I'm going to come back up here to country in my available fields, and I'm going to drag it on top of the prefix, and then it should populate in the country. So there we go. Well, that's pretty wild, those colors. That's a little too much for me. So now we've got our charts. I don't like that color, I don't like this, and some people ask about color, so we can change that. I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. Up here, right next to where we put the shape in, there's this theme and layout. Go ahead and tap on that, and that brings up a separate menu. This is where you can go ahead and you can come in and totally customize all the colors that you want. Even down here at the bottom, if you have an image like a school logo or something, you can upload that image and it will pull the colors from your logo automatically for you and create a customized palette, which is pretty cool. Or if you don't want to do that, you can just scroll through the different templates that they have. I'm just going to choose this harvest one. Why not? So now when I do that, all of my charts get updated into that color scheme, and it kind of looks like it belongs together. Hopefully we're okay with that. How long have I been working with Data Studio? I wouldn't say a long, probably about a year, honestly. There is a bit of a learning curve, but what I'm trying to teach you now is the stuff that I had to discover on my own that I wish somebody else would have taught me, because it would have been a lot faster. So one more thing I want to show you, the power of Google Data Studio is the ability to explore data. So a lot of times we get reports, like a spreadsheet, you put a chart in, that's a report. It's already, it's explanatory data. So we're telling you what the data is. The power in Google Data Studio is being able to explore data. And so one thing that we can do is add in something called a filter. And so if you go back up to where it says add charts and we come over, there's a calendar, and then there's this filter control. Looks like a little funnel, three lines getting smaller and smaller. What this does is it will allow you to decide what type of data to show. It'll create a drop-down menu and you can select specifically which data you want to show. So if we tap on that, we can just drag down, and this is why I like to have the border at the top, so I can put in my filters. This will automatically pull in Academy data. That's fine. And we're going to play with this in just a minute. So it'll make more sense shortly. I'm going to add one more filter for country. So if I come up here to filter again, I'm going to go ahead and just put another one in there. This is going to automatically recognize Academy again. That's okay. We can change that by our available fields. I'm going to just put that on top of the dimension there. And now I have two filters in here, one for Academy and one for country. So so right now, all we're doing is building up the background, and later we're gonna go in and play with it. I'm gonna add one more thing just to show you what you can do. We're gonna see how many records there are. Maybe you want to know how many students are in a class or in a cohort, or we want to know how many people were innovators this year. So if we go to add chart, we're gonna add one more chart, and it's a simple chart. It's called a scorecard. So this first one here, I'm just gonna click on that. And I'll just add it in right up there. And this scorecard automatically gives me a record count of how many people are in the Innovator Academy for 2019. If you're in the Brazil Innovator Academy for 2019, I apologize. I don't have that data in there. So this is all of the academies minus Brazil. Sorry about that. Okay, so our dashboard is basically set up. Now, let's take a look at playing with the data. So up at the top, there's this view button. So go ahead and click on that. And then that should get rid of the side menu. And now this is interactive. And so what you can do is you can hover over any of the charts. It'll pop up data for you. So like on the, I can hover over and see it's 66 people are from the United States, 5 people from Canada, etc. Down here on the countries one at the bottom with our cohort and countries, same thing. We can get a percentage, how many people are in different groups. So you can just hover over real quick. Also what we can do is we can do some filtering. So this Academy one, say for example, I wanted to know, if I click on that and it creates a drop-down menu, this gives us all our options of different academies. Maybe I only want to know who was, let's see, maybe just in the Asian region. So I'm going to untick New York, I'm going to untick London, and I'm going to untick Sweden. And when I do that, Data Studio will start filtering our data for us. And now when we look at this, this will only show, so it shows 108 people. So this only shows data from those 3 academies. So we can see Japan has a strong group of people. Australia looks pretty good. The United States is well represented. And then we can come down here, and I like this one about the diversity. We can look and we can see, for example, that the Singapore cohort was quite diverse with lots of different countries, whereas the Japan cohort, most of the people were Japanese that were there. So that's just kind of a cool way to filter and look at data. If you want to reset that, you can come back up here to this filter menu, and then this line at the top by Academy, just tap on that, and that will go ahead and reset your data. So you can't break this. If you give it to a teacher, you give it to somebody else, they can go on and filter and move things around, and they're not going to be able to break it. And all these charts in Google Data Studio are independent. So this is another reason why to use GDS. If you are creating something in a spreadsheet, for example, and you have people collaborating on a spreadsheet, when somebody goes in and looks at a chart or changes something, everybody else's information also changes at the same time. This doesn't happen with Google Data Studio. Everybody has an independent view, and they can filter and organize any way they want using the exact same template. So another reason why to use GDS. If you did want to filter by country, for example, you could take a quick look and see, like, I only want to see in the United States, where did people from the United States go? Which cohorts did they go to? Well, we have representation from every cohort. Isn't that cool? There were a lot more females than males from the United States. And then you could scroll through here. You can see different people's names. So that's kind of cool to see. Also, this table chart, you can also filter, like if you wanted to have all of the same things show up. For example, you want to filter by first name. If you just tap on the column header, it'll go ahead and automatically filter it. And it usually filters ascending and then descending. So say right now it's by last name by the end of the alphabet. Say I wanted it by the beginning of the alphabet. I just tap again, and then it'll go ahead and filter it for me like that. So that's just a real quick look at kind of what Google Data Studio is, how it's set up, how you kind of connect some things together. And so that's the first part. I've got a second part that we'll get into this student profile page in just a minute. Before I do get into that, any questions right now that I can, does anybody want to hop on and unmute themselves and ask anything? Okay, cool. All right, the spreadsheet, yeah, you can set it to automatically update itself every 15 minutes. That is correct. And as Clay Smith said, yes, you can force refresh up at the top. There's this refresh arrow. So if you did update some data in your spreadsheets, it'll update. That's why I like to use this. This is dynamic. We have teachers that are inputting scores all the time. And then, so this will automatically dynamically reflect any new data that comes in. It automatically 15 minutes, but if you did enter something and you want it to populate immediately, you go ahead and click that refresh arrow. Okay. All right, so that's kind of the beginner thing, the beginner phase. Now this next, I'm going to go back to my presentation. The next thing that we are going to do on the next page is the one about the student profile. This might get a little intense. It might, but you might be okay. So if you feel like it's going to be intense, you could just kind of watch and follow along and try it. Watch the video later and try it on your own, or go ahead and give it a try with us. So you're going to need these two things. You need the student profile data set, and then you'll need the student profile template. So go ahead and click on those and get those opened up for yourself. Let's see. All right, so I'm just waiting for my information to load. When it does load, when you do get in, I just want to explain the spreadsheet for you, the student profile sample spreadsheet, just so that you have an understanding of the way this is organized. So if you collect data at your school, test scores and stuff like that in a spreadsheet, it might look something like this. So we have the roster tab, and this would be where you'd input your student and teacher information. This sample happens to be for a second grade class, so that has the year 2 in there. This is, you might use this information, you might not. This is how at Singapore American School we organize our spreadsheets so that we can connect students and teachers to data. Whenever you're connecting across multiple data points, it's nice to have something called a primary key, one identifier that you can use to connect a student to all their data. So we have an ID, a student ID, and that is typically what we use for our way to connect all of the data to the correct student. So that's what that's for. The Studio ELA tab, if we hop over to that, what this is the data. So if you look at the blue columns, that's automatically being pulled from the roster tab. So if I click on this the first student ID number up at the top here, I see a formula. And so this is basically saying, well, take a look at the roster tab and pull in everything where there are no blanks. So it just brings in all of this in the blue columns for me automatically. I don't need to update it. If I update anything on the roster tab, it'll be updated on each tab automatically. The orangish, light orangish columns, those are where teachers would manually input information. So these are reading level scores. The gray columns, this is all automatically calculated. These are automatically calculated fields that we'll use in the profile. So you don't want to adjust any of this this data unless you know what it's for. And you can tell if it's a calculated field or not by clicking on it and seeing a formula up here. If you see a formula, then that means that the spreadsheet is doing something else with data in the column, in the other columns. And if we keep scrolling over, there's more. So this is our writing data. We use the writing workshop out of Columbia Teachers College. And so this is the writing rubric scores. And we can see here like pre-scores, post-scores for each of the strands. A lot. Keep on going, more. And then this purple section, this is, we use an external assessment called Ames Web. And so this is scores from the external assessment, and this is data that has just been imported. So that's how what the colors mean. If we go to the math spreadsheet, it's similar. We have our roster, we have the orange, which would be scores that are input by the teacher. And then we would have the calculated fields and our external assessment. Just if you're curious, this the last tab, the CTC tab, this is how we use this for the formulas, and this is just kind of the back end work. So this has like our reading levels, and then we change those letters to numbers. And then for each grade level, we have a scale for what we consider to be concerned, progressing, and secure, or above. So we just have that listed here so that the program and the formula can go ahead and read that for us. All right, so that's the spreadsheet. We're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna connect this to the profile. So if you have the profile open, it should look like it's broken. It has a bunch of question marks or problems with it, and that's totally fine. That's done on purpose. So up at in order for you to do anything, you need to make a copy of this. So up at the top, there's right next to the refresh arrow, there's a make a copy of this report. So go ahead and make a copy, and then that way you'll be able to do this on your own. Okay. Like I said, put it in the chat if I'm going too fast here. So now it's going to go ahead and bring in this top page. This is just a link back to the data if you need it. The cool thing about Data Studio is also you can have multiple pages in here. And I'll show that to you in just a second. Right now, you cannot do anything because you don't have any data connected. So we need to add our data again, the same way we did before. If we go to the right side, scroll down here to create new data source. I'm going to tap on that. And we're going through the same process. We're going to find Google Sheets. That's what we're using. And it's getting a little laggy. Hopefully yours is going okay. And now that we had that student profiles sample, that should be at the top of your spreadsheet list. If it's not, you can scroll and find it. We are actually going to be importing two different spreadsheets for this, the Studio ELA and the Studio Math. Let's do just one at a time. So I'm going to click on Studio ELA, so that row is highlighted. Then I'm going to go ahead and click on Connect. All right, so this has our data coming in. Just real quick, if we want to scroll, I know there's a lot of information in here. I've double checked it. It should be fine for our purpose, but you can see how it has picked up some things like scores or numbers, which are what we call metrics. And then it's picked up some other things as text that might be like a student name or a teacher name or something like that. So we'll just go ahead and leave that as is. We're going to click on Add to Report. And now that we've added that to the report, now we get our menu on the side. We get our ability to add charts and those types of things. So I mentioned about pages. So when we create reports for teachers here at SAS, the one that I show you, the student profile page, that's one page in a report that a teacher has access to. So most grade levels, we have anywhere from 6 to 10 different pages of data that they can look at. So we have like all the reading assessments on one page, all the math assessments on one page. So we try to separate it so that they can get really granular with whatever data that they want. Up here where it says page 1 of 2, I'm gonna click on that and I'm gonna go down to this student profile page. So go ahead and click on that and then you should recognize this. And we get all these system errors and stuff, and that's totally fine. And the reason why we're getting system errors is because we don't have any data connected. So in order to connect data, what you need to do is just hover over one of the charts or one of the bars. So I'm gonna start at the top, and this is a filter that we created like with the map. And when I click on that, over on the right-hand side, you'll see these pink things that say invalid dimension. It's saying invalid dimension because there's a dimension in there, but it has no idea where to get that information from because we haven't selected a data source. So click on the top where it says select data source. And we already added this one where it says added. This is your ELA one. So go ahead and click on that. And then it should, you'll see it starting to work and it should put in some, there it goes, the teacher has been populated. I can do the same thing if I hop on over to the next one. It's the same, this is a bit of a tedious task. You do kind of need to go through and do this individually on the template. But one thing that you can do, which I'll show you in just a minute, is you can actually select multiple things at once. So I'm just selecting that ELA Studio ELA data source for all of these. And so now we have our filters and our count number and all that kind of stuff at the top. This section here at the top third, this is for math. We haven't connected our math data, so I'm gonna wait on that for a minute. So let's scroll down to the middle section. And this is our writing information. And we see these little boxes here for growth, and then we see a big box, that's for a graph. What you can do if you wanna select multiple data points, if you wanna select multiple graphs and add the same data source, you can click, and don't click on the triangle. It'll tell you there's an error. So we don't want that. But if you hold down the Shift key and click, you can select multiple things. Now this, the way it's set up, it makes it a little bit hard to see if you've selected it or not, but I'm just gonna select those 5 at the bottom. If you select a whole bunch or you try to select everything, Google Data Studio doesn't like it and it's gonna have a hard time. So I'm just gonna select those 5 at the bottom, go up here to data source, and I'll select the ELA data source. And then it should start churning out some of that stuff. So now we've got these numbers that are coming up. I'm going to go back and click on the bigger chart here, do the same thing. So I connect that to my data source. So this is kind of the cumbersome part of it. You just got to go through and click and go through that. If you are feeling like you understand this and you're doing just fine, please feel free to zoom past me. You don't need to wait for me. So I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'll click on these 3, connect it to my ELA. Ooh, a little too fast. I'm not sure if yours is getting bogged down or not. Mine seems to be dragging a little bit. Sometimes, depending on how much stuff you're doing, Google Data Studio does take a while to process. So if it does, you just have to be patient. It is Google. It is free, so keep that in mind. The last thing for ELA, that I got a couple more. Let's take a look at the. Let's take a look at this. The reading And I know that when I click on this, I've tried to set up a template to make it work, but it hasn't been working for me. But I'll show you what you can do to create these. So when I click on these, I'm going to go and add my data source again and ELA again. And when this comes up, it should show blank. And we're going to fix that in a minute. I'm going to select the two small boxes and connect those, and then we'll be able to fix all those at the same time. So this is our CTC scores, and for some reason, even though in the template I have them in there, it's not pulling it in, so I'll show you how to set those up. So what we need to do, we have two different things. We have our CTC score, so the top box is for our CTC 1, that's our reading. I'm just going to add that to the dimension. And then I also want to put in this thing called status, CTC1 status. So that's telling us how that student is. If you remember back on the spreadsheet, we had like concern, progressing, secure. So I'm just going to add that below. And then that will give me another row. This is essentially a table, like the table that we made for the names. So this is pulling in a table. I've just changed the size of the table so it can only show one cell there. So that's CTC1. You can do the same thing with this. This would be CTC2. So I just come down here, find CTC2, drag that into my dimension. CTC status for 2, drag that in. And then we'll do the third one. I'm gonna get CTC3. And then the status for 3. Okay, now this one right here, these small boxes, this is our growth measurement. So if you kind of scroll down a little bit, you should see CTC growth 1. So that's what goes in that dimension. And then the second box would be CTC growth 2. All right. Something I wanted to show you is on the box here, it has, right now it says CTC growth 2. And over here on the profile, it says CTC ... G. We can actually change the names of the headers here without it affecting our data. So if I come over to dimension and I click on if I hover over the 1, 2, 3 and I click on the pencil, it'll bring this up, and I have a lot of different options here. I won't get into those today, but where it says name, if I just type in growth, then on my profile, it'll just change it to say growth. So that way, if you're working with teachers and they don't understand what some of the dimensions are, you can modify the titles to make it easier for them to understand that. And this doesn't affect your data, it doesn't affect your spreadsheet. It's just changing the title there. All the data remains the same. All right, so the last thing we're gonna connect for the ELA is our external assessments. And this right here, the way it's set up, it's just a formatting thing. It actually has two tables that are connected together. One is overlapping the other. The one on the left side is the English language arts stuff. The one on the right side is math. So we're gonna go ahead and highlight these two things, and I'm gonna do the same thing, select my ELA data source. And that should start pulling in some stuff. Okay, cool. So this is pulling in big numbers, and which isn't necessarily what we want. So we need to add in a dimension here. We actually need to add in the student. It didn't bring in the student for us. So if I add in student, it should adjust that for us. All right. And it looks kind of funky. It looks like the stuff is hanging off the side, and I'll show you how to fix that in just a second. Just gonna add in student for this one at the bottom. And what it's done, because it didn't pick up on the template, it has to resize these. So what you can do, if you right-click on a table, it brings up a menu, and you can do this thing that says Resize Columns. And there are two ways you can resize the columns. You can either distribute them evenly, or you can say Fit to Data. So for this one, we're going to choose Fit to Data, and it'll adjust the columns for me. And I'll do the same thing with the bottom one here. So there's that. So now all of our language arts data is connected. We're going to go back and do it for the math. The math will be a little bit faster because we don't have as much. So what I need to do in order to connect another spreadsheet, we don't have that button down here at the bottom where it says add data source, but we can go up here to resource in our menu up at the top. And if I click on that, there's this option to manage added data sources. So I'll go to there, and then from there I can find that add data source option. And this time when we go through the select Google Sheets, I'm actually going to select the Studio Math one. So if you're ahead of me, if your computer's working faster, you can select the math one from the student profile sample, Studio Math, and then go ahead and connect that. And this information here should be fine. So we'll just say add to report. And now when it loads, we'll go through the same process that we did with the ELA, connecting, adding the data source. And then, if you have this menu here, you can just click on the close, the X up in the upper right-hand corner. We'll go through the same thing. So I'm going to come into here, and I will select, I'm just going to shift and select those three. And then for selecting data source, I'll find my math one. Now, if it's cut off like this, just wait for a second and hover, and let it hover, and then it'll pop up and show you which one it is. So I know that that's the one I want. And then also, if you didn't pick the right one, it just won't connect it. And then you know that you selected the wrong one. You can go back and get the other one. So I'm going to connect all these together. And like I said, if you go too fast, sometimes you're faster than Google Data Studio. If you end up going too fast and trying to connect too much together all at once, it doesn't really like it, and then you have to refresh everything. It'll stay connected with what you already had connected, but sometimes it kind of gets goofed up. So right now, if you have this done, you should have all of your data connected. Now, if we scroll through, we've got our data connected. Now this is, oh, sorry, down at the bottom. Whoops, my bad. Go down to the bottom, let's connect our external assessment. So this one here, and this one here, and I'll shift and hold to get both of those down. And we'll select our math data for that. And that one did the same thing. It pulled in big numbers. So what we want to do is select individual tables, and we need to add in the student name as soon as it's ready for us. Into the dimension tab. And we have to go through that same process of kind of resizing. So we'll do that again. So remember, if you want to resize your columns, you just right-click on the table and find Resize Columns. For this one, we're going to say Fit to Data. And we'll do the same thing for the bottom column. So that student name is showing up in this math one as well, but I've just layered it so that it doesn't show up because we already have the student name on all the way over on the left side. Okay, so our template is done, our data is connected, and now if I was to give this to a teacher, they could explore it. So we can click on the view menu here. I want to show you something real quick before you do click on the view menu. If you click on it, it might get really big and it might not all fit on the page. So if you are in the theme and layout, if you click on layout, you can make sure that this says fit to width, okay, instead of actual size. So as long as that says fit to width, you should be fine. And then you can click on view. When that goes live, all right, so we have our information here. Now, the cool thing about this is the power of the filters at the top. So this right now, if we can imagine that there's a grade level, a second grade in a school, and there are 3 teachers in the grade level. So we have teacher 1, 2, and 3, and maybe you are teacher 2. So you say you only want to look at your class. So I can click on that on the only, and now this filters all of the data just for my class. Sometimes it does take a moment. You can, so now if I wanted to, oh, this is how my class is doing on average. I see we're making some growth there. Wow, numbers and fractions is looking really good. I'm scrolling down. Okay, we might want to look at some of our language assessments. Okay, the growth here, just to let you know for the reading, even though from K to K, that should be 0. This is just an average growth. So if there are more kids that grew, this is going to change it to the average score. So just kind of don't worry about that. And then I can go down here, and this is showing me all the students overall. So we're not going to worry about that too much. Now, if I wanted to pick an individual student, say I have a parent that I'm meeting with, or I wanted to talk to a student about their scores, I can go over here and I can find the student that I want. And I can just click on that student. And now this data will be filtered to show only that student's information. So I can talk to a student about their growth in certain areas, or I can talk to their parents about growth. So this student here is doing quite well, especially in math. We can see they make great strides in those 2 strands. One thing we could look at is maybe we could say language, oh wow, there's no growth, but actually for us at SAS, the 3 is what we expect. So wow, that's really good. Even though you didn't grow, you're still meeting expectations and your reading looks good. And then the Ames web, that's just external for if you wanted to do some triangulation. If you wanted to print this out, you can on the share menu, you can click on the drop down menu here. And if you click on download report, it'll save it for you as a PDF. You would just probably choose the page that you want, the student profile, and it will print out to the filter that you have on there. So if you, if you're looking at your whole class, it'll print out your whole class. If you filter a student, it'll print out just that student. The one thing is you cannot batch print. So you can't say, I want to print out all 25 of my students at once. Unfortunately, it doesn't have that capability, okay? So there you go. That's about all I had to share on that. That might have been overwhelming for some or not enough for some. Any questions or comments on that?
Hey, Chris, this is Clay. My question is, if I wanted to do user level data, like let's say I wanted my students to be able to access just their scores, is there a way to do that?
Well, that's a great question. I guess you would have to set up, trying to think about how you could do that. I haven't ran into that as far as sharing it with students yet. I haven't come to that situation, but that's a great thing to explore. I don't have an answer for you right now. I wish I did. Any other, I'm gonna hop off of there. Any other questions? Let's see if I can go through this real quick. Let's see. So if you wanted to share this, one of the questions was, how would you share this with the 3 teachers? So just the same way that I shared the template with you, you could go up to share, and you can decide who to invite. And there was some information about data privacy see as well. Now you can set this up. It's just the same as any other Google Doc. You can decide, are you going to share this just within your organization? You're going to share it with just certain people? Do you want anybody on the web to have the link? You have the same sharing features with this as you do with any other Google Doc. So that's kind of how sharing works. And like I said, the cool thing is that if you share it with them, it's usually just view only unless you make them an editor, and they can't go on and break it or anything. All right. Any other questions? Anything else? I'll look at the document that was shared, and I'll try to go through and answer some of those questions. And if anything else comes up, I'm fairly active on Twitter, so you can just send me a direct message on Twitter. That's probably the fastest way to connect with me if you have anything. I'm happy to collaborate. If you've got something that you're working on and you can't get it to work, or you want to know how to connect things together, let me know. Anything with spreadsheets, formulas, organizing data, just let me know, and I'm happy to do it. And information about so my Twitter handle, if you look on the slideshow, it's up on the first slide, and it's also in the chats. It's up right up at the top. I think I was one of the first people to put it in, so you can get my handle there at SmithRChris. So you can get my handle that way. Okay. Let's see what else.
Chris, thank you. Thank you so much for delivering that. I think that was a great whistle-stop tour of Data Studio, and I know when I've personally looked at Data Studio in the past, it has been awfully daunting, and this step-by-step approach, going through it with some great nice templates has been really handy and really useful, and I think a lot of people in the chat have felt the same way. And I know it can be daunting. I felt the same way several times, but the great thing here is we've had this. We're recording this Hangouts, so it will be uploaded to YouTube as soon as it's processed, and we'll share that with everyone as soon as it's uploaded through the email invites that we had. I can see Stephanie's posted a link to a feedback form. So please, before you hop off to Hangouts, please, it would be really grateful if you could fill out the feedback form and leave your feedback. The document will also be open, so I'm sure Chris will be happy to take a look at that as well. And then if you have any other questions, then feel free to follow us on Twitter and send us send us any questions through. I
wanted to make one more quick comment before we get off. I put into the chat, and it's also on the last slide of the presentation that I shared. There's another lady in Massachusetts, Laura Tilton, who is a data. I'm not sure what her official title is, data analyst, data scientist. Anyway, she works with I think she works in a school district there, and she does all their data for them. I put it in the link. This is her template website. She's trying to build up templates around education as well. So I'm doing some collaboration with her, and that's another place to check for some possible templates. And we're going to be working together on building more templates with sample data sources and that type of stuff. That'll be available to use. So just take a look at that if you need something else.
That's great. Thank you so much for that, Chris. It's really great to see so many more resources and great examples of Data Studio being used in schools, and I know that a lot of people are excited to get cracking with it more and more. Does anyone else have any burning questions they'd like to ask before we wrap up?
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Chris. I learned a lot. We're going to probably need a round 2 when I get some data that I want to create. So thank you.
Sure.
I agree. Thanks, Chris. You're awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for coming along, and especially thank you to all the folks in the UK who are still up at 11 in the evening. I definitely thought it was a really great session, and we will definitely have some more coming along soon. There's some burning issues that are facing schools, especially with the coronavirus outbreak, and we'll be looking at running some hangout sessions soon, looking at the possibilities of distance learning and what schools can do. If there's any sort of need for schools to close for extended periods, and I know quite a few of the folks on the Hangouts right now have been working behind the scenes, working on some great plans that schools can really make use of. But yeah, once again, feel free to follow us all on Twitter, and we will look forward to seeing you all again soon at the next Hangouts. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.